Back in the basement again today to give you a quick overview of the Juggernaut AI powerlifting program, which I ran for the past 6 months. Now, my goal here is to hopefully make a short, concise video of what I liked, what I didn't like, and maybe some things that I do differently or like to see changed. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the program because I try to do that along the process. Again, 6 months is a long time to cover, especially in just one video. So I gave updates throughout the course of running it with mini reviews within, covering things like the hypertrophy block, the strength block, the peaking block, the testing block, the deloads, a day of training, what it looks like, how I like to run it and adjust and pick accessories and supersetting in stuff. I've done all that. I've created a playlist. I will link it either in a card on the screen or in the description box below. I've been making YouTube videos for 10 years, but I still don't know a lot of stuff about YouTube. Go figure. But in this particular video, let's talk about first what I liked about the program. Far and away, the app and the interface itself. And that sounds kind of stupid, right? That's what you liked about the program? You liked the app? Yes, and let me explain. I've been running forms of Juggernaut AI training for the past several iterations, including AI programming from Garrett before he teamed up with Chad and Team Juggernaut. And always it was based on spreadsheets and Excel, which, don't get me wrong, that's how a lot of the programming that I'm used to gets done. But from an end user standpoint, logging stuff in an Excel spreadsheet, trying to switch out exercises, trying to do that on a mobile phone, and even if you use Google Docs or an app to do it, always run into problems. It's hard to do. Formulas don't always work right. The formatting gets a little bit funky. Switching out exercises, I tend to break things. I got to the point where I would screenshot my workout, do it, and then go up to my laptop or my workstation and input all my training. It's a very tedious process, but it was better than the alternatives. The app is fantastic, makes everything super easy in a super clean user interface. And throughout the course of the 6 months I ran the program, they updated it and released some patches as well for any bugs that I or you found. And I can't say enough good things about it. So I really like the app. Now, the app is all for naught if the programming itself isn't good. And I've run AI programming before, like I said, and I got okay results, but I tended to burn out or just not like the user experience, and I moved on to something else. I got impatient. I ran this one for 6 months, and I had great results. So from start to finish, I put roughly 175 pounds back on my total. Now, this explanation is going to take a little bit of context as well because it's not all clear as just adding 175 pounds. When I started this program right around the start of the year, I had been training again for 2 or 3 months after moving into this house, after having taken about 2 or 3 months off to move. I didn't have access to equipment. We got delayed moving in, and once we moved in, it was about settling and just getting back in the routine of moving. And I wasn't training specifically for powerlifting, but I wanted to set my baseline levels of strength so I knew where I was starting and where I was ending, and also so my training would go according to plan. I didn't want to under or overshoot any of my numbers. So at test out, my squat started at 520. At the end of the program, it was 605, which is a lifetime PR for me both in the gym or in a meet. For bench, started at 325 and was able to increase that to 345. Now, 20 pounds might not sound like much to a lot of you, especially on bench when my bench isn't anything to write home about, but 345 is only 5 pounds off my all-time gym best. And I've been struggling with bench for the past couple of years. I've just been like stagnant around 330 to 340. So to be able to get there and exceed it was a super big win for me. So happy about that. Lastly, with deadlifts, started at 545, ended at 605, but I'd like to put an asterisk there for that. Because even though I was able to hit a 605 single, and even an asterisk for a lot of the other lifts in this training program, even though I was able to hit 605 at the test out date, I was able to do a lot better during the course of the training. And I'll talk about deadlifts a little bit more in depth about what I don't like as well and kind of try to explain and give some feedback on that. But I was able to hit 615 for a double in training, 585 for 4 at a relatively easier RPE in training. And I think there was definitely more in the tank. But as you guys probably remember from my last video, I ended up coming down with some sort of virus fever the last couple of days of the peak, which extended into my test out date and beyond. And I basically had to take a week off of training. And the first day I felt a semblance of my old self, I came down in the basement and tested out. So I definitely wasn't feeling the best, and I didn't really prep the way I should be given my sickness, but I was still able to hit those numbers. And like I said, from where I started, was still at least a 175 pound add-on back to my total, which I am super pumped about. Now, another thing I like about this program or the training cycle in general was the fact that I ran it for 6 months, and from day one, I knew a majority of my plan for that entire 6 months. I could see exactly what I was going to do, what block I was going to be in, how long they were going to run, how the volume and intensity kind of played off of each other. I knew when all my deloads were. And I'm super appreciative of that because typically when I run programs that I find online or that I pay for, it's in smaller chunks. It's a 4-week block and then you have to get a new one. You don't know what you're going to get. It's always that anticipation of waiting to hear back from your coach or whoever's doing your programming to send you your new training. Or it's a 9-week program or a 12-week program, but it tends to be a little bit shorter and it doesn't have the long term in mind. For this app, literally every single thing is laid out in front of you, and you could literally run this program forever. Now, true, I ran it for 6 months, and at the end of that, it could go on and run another version of the powerlifting, or what I chose to do actually was go into the power building, and it gives you a bridge cycle in between. You select the length of that bridge. It's basically a way to transition between program to program, so you're fresh and you're not burnt out and you're not running yourself into the ground. So I'll get into that in a different video, but I've 2 or 3 weeks into the power building, enjoying it a lot. But again, I really like the way that that's laid out. What I also like about this program is the structure of payments. Now, this is an interesting topic because a lot of people might say that this is a negative for me. And I've seen a lot of people complain about this when I talk about the app. They say, I like it, but at $30 to $35 a month, every single month, a subscription-based model, that is dumb. I don't want to pay every month for a training program. And I get it. I wouldn't either for a cookie cutter template that you might be getting or you might be used to that everybody gets. But as I've already stated, the program itself lays out a complete training cycle over the course of however long you choose to run it. And it's not just the same training every block. Every 4 weeks, it's not the same thing. In fact, when you start each individual day and fill out that pre-training survey and fill out how you feel, what you ate, how you slept, anything else going on, if you're training around an injury, your training could literally change every single day. In fact, it did for me, and it came back to bite me in the butt a couple of times because what I tended to do was look at my training, especially before some of those max effort weeks, which is at the end of the blocks, where you do these like RPE 10 sets, and I'd look at, let's say, squat, and I'd see a number, and I'd go, oh God, that's a lot of weight. All right, let me get myself mentally prepared. Then I'd go into the gym the next day and load that weight up or work up to that weight and do it, only to remember that I hadn't done my pre-training survey. And depending on how I felt that day, if I felt really good, that number that I initially saw last night was going to go up because I felt so good that day. Or maybe I didn't sleep because I was worried about that number, or my kids were awake having nightmares, whatever kids do these days. That number might have gone down accordingly to make me work within my given capacity. So I really like that. And again, with some of this stuff, what you do, you can add on extra sets and volume, and you can really see a benefit that way. But it's not just a cookie cutter template that you're getting. It's literally like having a coach in your pocket every day, training you based off of how you feel. So that's why I see a value in it. And especially because I've been someone who's paid a lot of coaches over the years, from Dan Green to Brett Gibbs to Garrett Blevins to Bryce Lewis to, I can't even remember them all. All great coaches, for the most part. Who am I talking about? Who's to know? New video? Maybe. But that stuff gets expensive. I've paid several $100s per month for some of those coaches in some instances. Didn't get that same return. And in this case, I'm talking about, again, $30 a month over the course of 6 months, putting 175 pounds at least on my total. I'd like to think I had some more in me if I was feeling better. I spent $180. That's cheap. If I ran it for the entire year, which you could run this forever, it would cost me about $380, which is not that much more than some of these other coaches charge per month. Wrap your mind around that. And it wasn't as hands-on in some cases. We'd have maybe weekly or bi-weekly meetings. Some coaches are better than others when it comes to that. But again, for the price that I was paying and what I was getting out of it and what I got out of it, I think the pricing here is a big win. Now, another thing I really liked about this, again, I mentioned the app already, but for me, one of the issues I had previously was swapping out exercises and kind of working with what I had on me. And that's one of the questions I get from a lot of people is, hey, what if I don't have XYZ equipment? Do you need to go to a gym for this? The answer is no. Literally, even though this is built around benching, squatting, and deadlifting, and it will program those movements in, as well as some accessories to address weak points, which are dependent on your pre-training survey that you take, you can swap out anything. You can swap out bench, squat, and deadlift if you don't have access to that particular day. Maybe you want to do a variation of that instead because you're off season, so to say. Maybe you're traveling or in a gym where the equipment that you need is being used. You can swap out any exercise at any time, and it's going to log your progress there as well as program for you depending on where it is in your training session. What I also like about this is when you do swap it out, it asks you if you want to switch it just for the week or for the entire training block. And this is a way that I use this to kind of figure out at the start of a training block, let's try some new exercises, let's give it some play, see how it goes. And if I like it, the next week I'd input it for the rest of the training block, or maybe I didn't like it, I'll switch it again until I found something that I liked. But I really like the versatility of this program, being able to swap out on the fly like that. Now, even though I really like this training program, I like the interface, I got a lot of good results, it's really easy to use with the app. It's not perfect. I had some issues with it, right? I mean, nothing's perfect. And if I just made you a video telling you everything was great, it would come off as too salesy. Everything is not perfect. And again, there are some things that I would potentially like to see different. Number one, the first thing I want to talk about is attempt selection in terms of warming up for the weights. So each day you go in and you start your pre-training survey. I've already mentioned that. There is a warm-up where you can do some stuff to get loose. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about working up to working sets. And to be honest, during the course of a normal training session, that's not that important to me. Working up to a set of 5 or whatever, I can do that. But when it comes to actually testing out and working up to your 1 rep maxes, the test out, the culmination of 6 months, all you really get is your attempts for each of the 3 big lifts, which is good. I mean, I talked about that in my previous videos where I thought the attempt selection was right on point. I would like to see them add in something that goes through the attempt selection in terms of what you need to do to warm up for those. I think that's a big skill that not a lot of people have, including myself. And I think if I could get better at that, that would go better for my actual attempts. And I think it would be easy enough to add on or link in or show or enable, disable. If people didn't want that, they could just say disabled or skip over it like that I typically did with the normal day-to-day warm-ups. I would like to see them add that in. Another problem that I had with the program was, honestly, I felt that I was my strongest about 4 months in. Now, I don't necessarily think that is entirely the program's fault. It might be. Part of that is my fault. And what I mean by that is about 4 months in, I felt the strongest I have on the program. All of my rep sets were going really well. My max effort sets were really strong for me, setting some rep PRs. But I felt like I should test out around then, because 4 months of training is a long time for me. I mean, usually, I'm used to these 12-week macro cycles, or whatever you want to call them. The 6-month long-term haul, I had a hard time waiting to get to the end. And unfortunately, like I mentioned already, I got sick at the very end, which to me kind of put a little bit of a damper on this otherwise fantastic experience on this program. Again, I'm not blaming the program for getting me sick. It just happens. But I would have liked to have been able to test out when I felt my best, and I think I could have put up a lot better numbers. Now, I do think also one of the areas, interestingly enough, where this caused a concern was with my deadlifts. I mentioned that I had some trouble with my deadlifts towards the end, and they dropped significantly versus what I had during my training. Part of that was I had that set of 585 times 4 that I previously mentioned. I rated at the RPE at the time, and it suggested my 1 rep max should increase from a projected 620 to 625 pounds up to anywhere between 655 and 685, I want to say. Something ridiculous, right? Something well outside of my range. Like, the set went good. 585 times 4 went well, not well enough for me to add, 50 pounds potentially to my 1 rep max. And I actually have the text that I sent to Garrett at the time saying, hey, had a set. It came back with some suggested 1 rep max increases. They all seem way too high to me because what it does is it gives you 3 different numbers to pick from, a low, a medium, and a high range. And I said, even the low range seems really high. What should I do? So he called me. We had a conversation, basically said, go for the lower end of the range and just rate the RPEs going forward accordingly, which I did. But I still think that came back to bite me because my deadlifts never really recovered from that point on. So I think if I could do it again, what I would likely do is just choose not to update my 1 rep max, which is an option, by the way, if it seems like a too big of a leap. I mean, if it was like a 10 pound, 15 pound increase, I think that's more doable, but a minimum of like 30 pounds increase, too much, and I think it did come back to bite me in the butt. But again, as I mentioned, I got sick, and also around that time, I was doing a lot more physical labor outside the gym. And as exciting as that sounds to say it, I'm not talking about what you're probably thinking in your mind right now, cheeky. I was doing more labor outside in terms of like yard work, playing with my kids, doing stuff that uses energy and tires me because I'm not used to doing it. But as we transitioned from starting the actual training in winter to spring to summer, 6 months is a long time after all, I just found myself getting more and more fatigued, and I just never really recovered from that given the training and the numbers. And even though the deloads were built in, for me, deadlifts are something that I carry a lot of fatigue in, and I just can't seem to recover in some instances, which is a real shame because, as I mentioned, this program overall, deadlifts for me were actually feeling like they were finally coming back after taking like a 3-year hiatus. So I wasn't a big fan of that necessarily. But overall, like I said, I really like the program a lot. I would highly recommend it to anyone. You need to make sure that you understand your RPEs, and you also have to be as honest as possible with the program. If you're undershooting everything or overshooting everything, the program needs to know, and it will adapt accordingly. So if you're not rating things accurately for pride, or maybe you just don't know, the program isn't going to run up to its full potential, and you might find that you're going to not like it, or it's going to be too heavy or too easy in some circumstances. Now, as far as the pricing goes, what I will tell you is I do think since I first signed up, the price has increased to around $34 or $35. They actually have a website now that you can go and sign up through, and the reason I'm going to say the website is because Apple and Android, I think, did away with discount codes through apps because they're money hungry, as are a lot of people. But if you go through the actual website to sign up, which you can then access one of the apps with your username and login that you create on the app, you can actually use discount codes on that website. In fact, I have my own discount code of BASEMENT, which I believe saves you 10%. And to be honest, I've had this code for like 2 months. And if people have asked me if I have a code, I've told them, but I haven't broadcast it because I wanted to make sure I ran it for 6 months to get my true thoughts and feelings on it. And again, even though the test out didn't go how I wanted to, at the end of the day, 6 months, 175 pound total increase, $180. I'd pay that all day, every day. If you have questions on the program itself or anything about the power building program that I'm just about 2 weeks in on, I will do an updated video on that, of course, but leave it in the comment section below and I'll get to it as soon as I can. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and stay big.